Hi, and welcome to BariAftercare, the podcast. And we have a very fancy word as our topic tonight. We're going to jump right in. And the title of tonight's episode is a big word that'll bring you big results: individuation. Here's what we're going to cover. First of all, what's up with the big fancy word? And why are we talking about this? And how does it relate to your life after having weight loss surgery or after having lost weight from whatever method, so that you can keep that weight off and have that healthier lifestyle? We're going to look at your persona, yet another fancy schmancy psychological word. We're going to talk about how do you shred that persona, because that's going to be an important part, spoiler alert, of being able to individuate, our biggest, fanciest word for the episode, and become more authentic and individuated. Then we're going to talk about putting your true self into practice in your everyday life and protecting your weight loss. That means you're going to be able to better follow through with your healthy lifestyle and the awesome things that you've been able to do since losing weight. So let's get started. What is up with this big fancy schmancy word called individuation, and where did it come from? And more specifically, what's it got to do with weight loss and weight maintenance? Honestly, because I like to go beyond the topic of bariatrics when I do the podcast, I want to say that individuation, which you will soon learn to understand, is something that's important to have your best life regardless of any issues you have or don't have. It's part of the developmental process, but a lot of people opt not to go through with this process of individuating. And we'll talk about the reasons for doing that. But I'm going to encourage you to listen to what this business of individuating is, not only so that you're better able to set boundaries for yourself, speak your mind, say no to unhealthy foods, refrain from emotional eating, stay motivated when you feel like you're tired of exercising, but so that you can have healthier relationships, so you can be more effective at your job, you can be a better parent, and you can like yourself better. So this process of individuation, yes, it's definitely going to help you in your bariatric lifestyle, but it's going to go further than that, and it's going to benefit you in every single area of your life. And that's what a lot of these psychological topics are about, and that's what BariAftercare is all about. It's bringing you the information not specifically related to nutrition, not specifically related to exercise, but about the whole mindset and about your whole self as a person, because it requires your whole self, mind, body, spirit, to live your best life and to stay in tune with the behaviors and the lifestyle required to keep weight off, or to stay away from drugs, or to stop overspending, or to refrain from too much time in social media, but to live your best healthy life. Back to the definition of individuation. So what is it? Individuation can actually be really, it can be very complicated, but we're going to keep it pretty simple, because the bottom line of it is that it's becoming your most authentic self. And because it's kind of a complicated theory, maybe that's why it's got such a fancy name. I'm going to tell you its origins, but we're not going to go into the deep parts of it. If you're interested in it, I will have links in the show notes that will lead you to some articles where you can read about it if you're so inclined, but I doubt you will be. But just in case. All right, so individuation is a term that was coined and clarified back in the days when Freud lived, but not by Freud. It was a psychiatrist who lived at the same time as Freud, but his theories kind of diverged from Freud's, even though he had been a student of Freud's. And his name is Carl Jung. and he's kind of known, his theory is called Jungian psychology or analytical psychology. Doesn't matter either way, right? But this whole theory of psychology is from a psychiatrist named Carl Jung. And basically, you can boil down his work to this process he called the individuation process. Now, I joke with people. You've heard me probably on prior podcasts, or if you've listened to any of my other work, I do talk about this process of individuation. And how I kind of summarize it is this one litmus test. Can you say no to your parents and not feel guilty? To me, that's kind of a summary of whether or not a person has worked through the individuation process. Now, for a lot of people, when we hear that question, can you say no to your parents and not feel guilty? It's like, oh, gasp. Of course not. My God, I could never. Well, maybe I could say no, but I'd feel really guilty. It's a difficult thing to do, to stand up to your parents and to be adult about it. So after we describe this process of individuation, you'll better understand why that's kind of my litmus test. So I'll repeat that again at the end. But notice your reaction when I ask that question. Are you able to say no to your parents and not feel guilty? So there's just a thought for you. All right, so in its most basic terminology, what individuation means is figuring out who you really are. It's coming to understand who you were born into this world to be before all of the trappings of life, and we'll talk about what those trappings of life are, snuffed your authentic self out of you or covered up the essence of who you really are, who you came into this world to be. So as you figure out who you really are under what I refer to as all of life's BHB, which comes from one of my favorite movies of all time. It's House Sitter. If you haven't seen House Sitter, watch it. It's hysterical. It's got Goldie Hawn. It's got Steve Martin. Anyway, BHB stands for Big Hairy Bullshit. So as you figure out who you are, brace yourself. Under all that big hairy bullshit that life heaps upon us, you're going to find out and live according to who you came into this world to be, your genuine calling, your genuine self, your most authentic self. You are individuating. You're learning who you are as an individual, not somebody who is one of the collective of this world. So I read several articles while I was trying to decide what order I was going to present information on individuation. And in one of the articles I read, the author described individuation, referring to the process of separating from, that word I just used, the collective, meaning our parents, the kids we went to school with, the people in our social groups, getting out of all of those collective social norms, the cultural norms, to live as the unique individual that we were born into this world to be. All right, so let me slow down, back up, kind of retrace where we're at this point. The individuation process, according to Jung, Carl Jung, was his way of explaining the path to finding your best, your optimal personal development. So Carl Jung, the psychologist or the psychiatrist, had a lot of people who studied him. He had a lot of analysts who analyzed his work. And one of them wrote in a paper that he explains this individuation as the process, simple or complex as the case may be. So depending on your life and what you went through, by which every living organism becomes what it was destined to become from the beginning. So let's say, for example, that you were born with this amazing gift as an artist. And it's in you. You were born with this, and if you believe in destiny, or if you believe that we all have a calling or we have a purpose, you may or may not believe this. This is Carl Jung's theory. We have to go through this process of figuring that out and detaching ourselves from ways we may have fallen into the cultural norms to fit in. So let's say this child's born with this wonderful artistic ability, and in school, he's made fun of. He or she is made fun of. Their artwork is made fun of. And at home, they color and they draw all the time, but the parents aren't interested in that. They're interested in all academics, or maybe they're interested in all athletics, or maybe it's like, you're going to be in this family business, or you're going to be a nurse like all the other people, or a physician like all the other people in your family. And so they don't support or nurture. In fact, they discourage and they dissuade this child's brilliant, intuitive ability for art. So the kid's embarrassed by what the kids at school say to him about their art, and the parents discourage it, and so they kind of shut that down, because that's what kids do. They go by what's expected of them from the parents, or if somebody makes fun of them at school, then they don't want to do that anymore because they don't want to be made fun of anymore. So these are the kinds of things that kind of shut down our natural, inherent, unique individualism, right? So when they talk about having to work through and kind of wade ourselves through the weeds of life, this is what we're talking about, so that hopefully this person with this artistic talent will say, you know what, I don't care if they do make fun of me. You know what, Mom and Dad, I don't want to be part of the family business, or a nurse, or a doctor, or a lawyer, or whatever it is you wanted me to be. I want to do what I am meant to do, and that is art. That's the process of individuation, and coming to terms with, this is what I was placed here for. This is who I'm supposed to be. So individuation is wading through all of life's hairy bullshit to get to the place where you say, this is who I am. It doesn't matter what other people think or what other people want. So individuation is a natural process of development, just like learning to walk, or just like learning to talk, or just like children learning at a certain age, what is morally right or morally wrong, according to your culture, of course, right? There we have more cultural input, or coming to just the developmental milestones. Teenagers go through the teenage angsty stuff. So we go through all of these developmental stages until we become adults. And even as adults, we go through different developmental kinds of things. People in their 20s are often very social, and they want to fit in, and they're all about partying and having friends and being accepted. People in their 30s get down to business with jobs and careers and lives and sometimes children and things like that. In your 40s, you start to go, you know what? I'm kind of coming into my own. I don't care as much what other people think. And yet, some of us are still very sucked in by cultural norms or societal expectations or family expectations. There are a lot of people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and later in life who could not imagine telling their parents, no, I'm not going to do what you want or expect me to do. So those who go through the process of individuating, and we'll get to how you actually do that, are the ones who are more likely to be more authentic, be more themselves, follow through with their natural talents and abilities. So what does that have to do with weight and weight loss? We are getting to that. So keep in mind that the whole goal of individualizing, of individuation, individuating, is to become whole. It's like we're born this beautiful, wonderful whole self, and life gets in the way. It dumps on us in different ways. We go through different things. And that's why that one definition said, it could be a fairly simple process to individuate, or it could be a very complex process, depending on who you are, what's happened to your unique individual self over the years, and how buried under life's big, hairy bullshit your individual, unique self is. So how does that happen, and how do we get away from that so that we can, should we choose to, find that ultimate goal of being individuated? And the reason I chose this as a topic for this podcast is because people who are individuated are the ones who can say, you know what, Grandma, I love you, it won't change, but I'm not trying your 4 different pies that you baked. Because somebody else might be like, well, I can't hurt Grandma's feelings. No, a person who is individuated is going to say, that wouldn't be good for me. That wouldn't be good for who I want to be. That wouldn't be good for the person I am, who is a person worthy of speaking my mind. A person who has individuated will say to people, you know what? I am happy you have all chosen to go to the buffet. I'll meet up with you later because that's a place that's not safe or healthy for me. Because they're not afraid of being left out. A person who is less individuated or not individuated might be like, ugh, I know it's really not the best place for me to be at a buffet where all my, my food temptations are, but I don't want to be left out. I want to be part of the group. That's a societal, big, hairy bullshit thing. And that need, depending on how much hurt there is within this person, may override my individuation, my individual self who says, that's not a healthy thing for me. So the more individuated you are, not only will you be more likely to live out your purpose, if you believe in that, but you will absolutely, the more individuated you are, be able to follow through with a healthier lifestyle. You will be more willing to say, no, I don't feel like exercising, but you know what? I value who I am, and it doesn't matter how I feel. I'm going to do this because I committed to it, and I follow through with my commitments. That's what an individuated person does. So an individuated person, a person who goes through the process of individuation, saying, you know what, I don't need to do it just because everybody else is doing it. A teenager is not going to be an individuated individual. A little redundant there, right? But they are at a life stage, a developmental stage, where the most important thing is to fit in. It's kind of like saying to a teenager, if everybody jumped off the bridge, are you going to? Well, no, of course I'm not. But they'd probably think about it, right? Just to fit in. But individuation is a process that starts in the second half of life, typically. So it's not in your adolescence. It's not in your teen years. It's not even usually in your early adult years. So in my work over the last 30, 40 years, I have come across people who I think are early individuators. In other words, they start asking these hard questions of themselves, sometimes in their early to mid-20s, which is super early to go into this individuation process. But people in their very late 20s, early 30s, into their 40s are getting into that process where they start to ask themselves, if everybody jumped off the bridge, would I? Right? And ask themselves the healthy questions. So the first half of life, according to Carl Jung in this whole individuation thing, is making our way through the world, just trying to grow up, go through the developmental stages. Your brain is developing, you're learning social things, and you're learning all of this from your people in your home, your neighborhood, your schools, your community, your city, and eventually the larger world. And with, social media and all of our capability of seeing everywhere around the world, it's a much bigger influence on people as they grow. But you're just kind of making your way through the world into your 20s, right? You're just kind of doing your best to develop healthy egos. And that can be hard, depending again on how much big, hairy bullshit life deals you. Let me tell you where that scene comes from in this movie. So in the movie House Sitter, without giving the whole story away, it's just really, really funny. Goldie Hawn invites these two street people, homeless people, to be her parents at this party because her parents aren't around. I don't know what the story with her parents are. But one of them is very much a drunk. I think they both are. But the dad, the guy who pretends he's her dad for this party, starts talking to another guy who's a high-ranking official, retired official in the military, and he has this highfalutin job at this company. And he says to the guy, "So, are you working or are you retired?" And the drunk, who's pretending to be her dad, says, "I'm retired." And he says, "What are you retired from?" "I'm retired from life and its big, hairy bullshit." It's very, very funny, but you have to watch the movie to get it. But that's where I stole these words from. So in the first half of life, we're trying to make our way through life and dodge as much big, hairy bullshit as we can and to be a somewhat healthy, sane person. But by the time we get to our 30s and 40s, we're going to try to dig out of this conventional world. And what in this process of individuation, Jung refers to as the unconscious. So he says the unconscious part of life is the first half of life. We basically go through it as unconscious beings. We're just growing and living and doing and going through whatever we go through, right? We all start out as part of this huge collective. And I totally buy this. And this part's just a given, right? So we come into the world into this collective space. We share a home with our family. We share a classroom with peers. We share the school with a lot of other kids from our neighborhoods. Then we go on in life, we maybe go to a church or some other spiritual or religious institution. And all of these things, our schools, our parents, our relatives, our friends, our scout leaders, our coaches, all these people who are part of the collective of our life shape our personality. We're kind of unconscious. We're kind of going with the flow. We're trying to survive life as best we can. So through this period of time, we develop what is going to end up being our persona. It's like we have a public persona or we have this private persona. So it's how people see us outside in the world. And we can gauge how we act and behave based on how we want people to see us. So think about elementary school or middle school or high school. If you want to be one of the, most schools have had different cliques, right? If you want to be in the popular group or the emo group or, the jock group or the artsy group or the whatever, you behave like the other kids in those groups. Your persona, how you behave, how you act in those situations in public is how people view you and see you. And we tend to act like the other people that we want to hang around, right? So our culture helps shape our personality. And this is all through our environment and through our conditioning. Now we have good things coming in at us, and we have sometimes not so good things coming in at us. So maybe you're just, talented at music, and you're talented at sports, and you're coordinated, and you're smart, and everything comes easy to you, and you have a healthy appearance, and you have, maybe not a lot of big hairy bullshit comes your way. But maybe you're a kid at school who's clumsy, and people make fun of you, and you're the last person picked for the sports teams, and maybe your family doesn't have as much money, you don't wear the right clothes, and people pick on you. So that's going to affect you too. And your persona, or what you put out there to the public, is don't talk to me. So maybe you develop who you are by kind of closing in on yourself, trying not to be seen, trying to, avoid being the target of anything that's going to hurt you. But in this external world, we grow up, we go to school, we do the things, right? The environment is conventional in that it's guided by our society, whatever our culture is. It's conventional rules that are put forth by a larger group of people. So one way to think about this is your religious beliefs up to a certain point, your political beliefs, your manners, your level of manners, your attitudes about work, your attitudes about higher education, your attitudes about racism. All those things are formed by a host of all of these influences, right? So we learn from the people around us what you should believe. Maybe both of your parents were hardcore Democrats or hardcore Republicans, and so that's what you learned, and that's what you should believe until you get to an age where you start to individuate and you can figure out for yourself, you know what, I don't really believe that. Okay? Or what things mean. If you belong to a certain religion, you're told this is what happens when people die. If you belong to a different religion, you're told this is what happens when people die. If you're around people who set boundaries and rules for their children, then you develop, this is how children should behave. These are the things that, these are the guidelines children should have. These are the things we value in this culture, in this family, in this community. So all these things are kind of piped into us from our surroundings. Not only that, how we should perceive ourselves. All right, so the process of individuation starts with how we currently identify ourselves. So, when you become an adult, where are you at with how you identify yourself? We're going to talk about this, and then I'm going to give some examples, okay? So before you can begin this process, and remember, individuation starts in your second half of life. Until then, you're just kind of going about life trying to find your place. All right? Before this happens, we have kind of a certain identity, our self-identity. And our self-identity, or our self-concept. Now think about this. Prior to surgery, as you lose weight, if you've, struggled with other issues, has your self-identity, your self-concept changed over time? So what is this self-concept? It's a composite of your traits, your behaviors, your attributes, the qualities, how you identify yourself, how you describe or identify yourself. Like, I'm a passive person, or I'm a shy person, or I'm an aloof person, or I'm a charismatic person, or I'm a dramatic person, or I am a leader, or I'm a follower, or I'm a how do you describe yourself? What is the way you identify yourself? Because by the time you're a young adult, your perception is pretty codified, right? It's like, this is who I am. We think we know who we are. And Carl Jung says, we're clueless. We are really clueless about who we are, truly, on the inside. Because so much of what we have hidden from ourselves, we've done out of protection from life's big, hairy bullshit. All right. So we have this construct of me and I. You know, I don't make waves. I say what I think. I don't like conflict. I'm okay with bucking the system. I would rather, how you define what's this I? I am what? I am blank. How do you define yourself? Now he says we're very unconscious. Well, this is what we think we know about ourselves, but there's a whole bunch of stuff we don't know about ourselves until we start this process of individuation, according to Carl Jung. So, as such, he says, our self-identity is ultimately a distortion. And honestly, I very much agree with them. I very much agree with them, and I'll tell you part of the reasons why. And I'll use myself as an example, but this is where the problem comes in, and this is why I wanted to talk about this in this podcast. Because this identity that we present to the world is often a distortion. We often don't know who we really are because we've done so much to fit in the world. And that's just being human. And if we've had any kind of trauma or any kind of, teasing or bullying or, neglect or comparison or being ignored, there's a whole lot more distortion. There's a lot more big, hairy bullshit that's hiding who you really are, even from yourself. And herein, as I said, lies the problem. So we, each of us, along with the help of your family members, they gave you good or they gave you not good or they gave you some of both, along with our peers, society in general, social media, our desire to fit in, our want to be cool, our desire to be liked, our huge desire to be included, our desire not to be judged, our hope that we're not hurt or not hurt anymore. We don't want to be made fun of. We don't want to feel unsafe in our world. We don't want to be abused or neglected anymore if that's ever happened. All of these things are the big, hairy bullshit. And these are what cover up our genuine selves, even from ourselves. And a lot of times we end up with, I feel insecure, I feel unworthy, I feel less than, I feel not good enough, I feel undeserving, I feel ashamed, I feel embarrassed, I feel, because of all the big, hairy bullshit. So every one of us, to some degree, our actual self is hidden because all of us come into this world with goodness. I believe that we all come in with some goodness, but out of protection or out of need to not be hurt or not be made fun of or not be neglected or abused or whatever it is. We put on these layers of protection. And at some point, we become an adult and we have accumulated life's big, hairy bullshit and feel not so good about ourselves in some cases. So we go out into the world and we put on this persona, this act, right? Like we think and we act like we know who we are, and a lot of time, there are a lot of lies buried within us. Like, I'm an artist, not me, but the person we talked about earlier. This truth that I'm an artist and I know I'm good at it has been covered up by fear of expression, having been shamed, being told not to be that person. And so it's buried in there, and maybe to the point where not fully, but to some degree, the person has talked themselves out of. That's in there. That's in there. That's me. And if they choose to individuate and climb out from all the big, hairy bullshit and push it aside and say, that wasn't about me, they will rediscover who they really are. So let's talk about people who have struggled with the disease of obesity, or people who have buried themselves in alcohol and drugs, or people who spend exorbitant amounts of money and are buried in debt, or people who spend hours and hours and hours on the internet and are not present in life. These people are hiding. These are the ways we hide ourselves, even from ourselves. So, if you grew up and your identity is that of, well, I don't want to make waves. I avoid conflict at all costs. I'm really, it doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter. Don't ask me how I'm feeling. It's not, I don't want to say. I'm afraid to fail, or God forbid I succeed. I'm really afraid of that. So this is who you might have become in your life. It's certainly who I became, right? How many of us can actually say we live fully authentic lives? And if you say yes, I think you're pulling the wool over your head, because I don't think very many people ever live fully authentic lives. We've all known some people we look at and we're like, wow, that's who I want to be when I grow up. I want to be able to say, Mom, I love you, but I disagree with you on this topic. Dad, I respect you, but I've got to tell you, that theory doesn't work for me. Or your way of looking at religion or politics or whatever it is, parenting, isn't going to work for me. Whoa, that's brave, right? That is a person who has a sense of self. And people who have a very strong individuated sense of self are appropriate in speaking their mind, telling their truth, not expecting other people to do what they want or what they say, but they're just okay in who they are. Like it, don't like it. I'm not going to try to convince you to be the way I am. I'm not going to automatically go with the herd just to be included. I am who I am. And that's good enough. So we all know people who are like that, but as we're growing in that first half of our life, we have this desire, we have a quest for approval from our friends, from our parents, from our mentors, and even from strangers, right? So we often set aside what our intuition tells us is right. No, I really don't think I should do this. I shouldn't go along with the crowd, but I want to be included. No, I really don't want to run for another committee, but I'll be liked, or I'll be included, or they'll look up to me and I'll feel respected. So we ignore our intuition. We ignore that voice that tells us what's right for us, because we have this desire and this need to be included and loved and liked and part of. So sometimes this individuation process is a really scary thing. And because it is, a lot of people opt not to do it. And we'll talk about that again in just a minute. But let's talk about where you ended up as an adult. What are your personas? Think about yourself at work. What is the persona? What is it you want people to see? We don't have just one persona. We have a series of personas, which are really social masks, right? We all wear this mask, and especially people who have been hurt. A lot of people, I have experience with this for the last 30 years, people who struggle with the disease of obesity and, like myself, the disease of addiction. We wear these masks so people will think we're these great and wonderful people, but on the inside we feel very differently. So let's look at how this may play out. What is your persona? The person you project to other people, which may be very different from what's going on the inside. But so your persona, the public self, your social self, do you want people to think you're a perfectionist? Do you go to work and your persona is as a perfectionist? You're there on time, you get things done, whatever. You're a perfectionist because I don't want people to see anything messy about the inside of me. So I'm going to present myself as a perfectionist. What about, what if you've developed the persona that I'm the black sheep or I'm the scapegoat of the family? Thereby, you're out there, breaking all the rules and, you're the black sheep. That's who you are. That's who your family's told you were. That's who society tells you are. And so you're out there acting like the renegade. You don't care. You're going to break the rules. But inside, your heart might be breaking and you might be going, this is not who I am. Maybe you're the clown. Think of Robin Williams, right? Or people who present this very, very funny exterior and we think, oh my God, they must be a riot to live with. And we know what the internal, dilemma that he had. So this external persona was to survive in this world, but it wasn't his genuine, true self. So you have a work persona, you have an extended family persona, you have a friend persona. Do you have a pre-op persona? Do you have a post-op persona? How you want people to see you? Maybe your post-op persona is, I'm doing all the right things and I have all the answers and I can tell you how to do everything, but on the inside you're like, oh my God, I feel like my boat is sinking here. So in that, we have these personas, but do they match how we feel on the inside? And a lot of times there's a big disconnect. So the individuation process is finding your genuine self and not being afraid to be your genuine self. So the second half of life, according to Carl Jung, is when you're presented with the opportunity, partly because your brain's fully developed, but we turn inward. We start to become introspective. We start questioning. And I'll tell you, for me, this started at about the age of 30. And there had been moments before that when I would listen to my true inner voice, but I would completely brush it out of the way because of being buried under life's big, hairy bullshit and wanting to fit in and wanting to look like I was okay and wanting to, for example, I remember a time, and I was in my 20s, mid to late 20s, and I had a job selling encyclopedias door to door. So I'm out there working. And I had 3 little children at home. And I started this job so I could work part-time and be home with my kids most of the time. But because I had this need to look like I was okay, for people to think I was good at something, for people to think, to look up to me, because I didn't have much inner self-worth, which I didn't know at the time either. That was hidden from me, probably subconsciously on purpose. But anyway, I was just at that age where I was starting to question. I would remember being out there working. I was working so many hours, and I remember thinking a few times, what am I doing? What am I doing out here? And that was my inner voice saying, why are you killing yourself for this and not being at home learning to be a good parent, which is what you really want to do? I remember times in high school, glimpses, because I was doing things good high school children did not do. Although I looked like I was a very good high school child. But, I was doing what a lot of high school kids do and didn't drink frequently, but when I did drink, very much to excess, had a long-term boyfriend that I was doing things with that my Catholic parents would not have appreciated at all, and which really didn't go along with my values. But I wanted to be loved, and I wanted to fit in, and I wanted to, so I ignored the inner part of me. I ignored my true self. And I did this in various ways until the time I was about 30, and that's when I went into treatment. I was 29 years old. And when I went into treatment is when my individuation process began, because I had people around me named therapists who started helping me ask these questions like, is this who you really want to be, Connie? Is this what you really want to do? Are you running away from, things you, like your children or your family? And are you afraid to be a mom? And, all these things. So after that, I went into counseling for myself for 3 or 4 years, constantly in therapy, and really dug into this individuation stuff, really started digging into what was it? Why was I going against my own values? What was life's big, hairy bullshit that I was trying to fit in, to be liked, to, avoid my own feelings, to not speak my own voice? There's a really good book called Living the Truth. Great way to help you individuate. Living the Truth by Keith Abloh. I'll put it in the show notes. Anyway, so for me, the process began at around the age of 30. So let's look at your persona and how your persona might get in the way of your weight loss, and specifically maintaining your weight, because a lot of people have lost weight and then they regain it. We want you to keep this weight off, but things get in the way, and it could have to do with this lack of individuation. So let's look at your persona. Maybe you have a persona as the easygoing one, right? You're easy to be around. You don't ruffle anybody's feathers. You don't create waves. You go with the flow. How might this public persona have developed, and how might it negatively be influencing you? How might it be getting in the way of your living the kind of life that you want to live? So maybe you developed this go with the flow kind of attitude because when you were a kid, things were stressful and tense in your house and you wanted to keep the peace. So you learned to keep your true thoughts and feelings to yourself. Maybe you wanted to be accepted as a teen, so you just went along with the crowd and did what everybody else did, and you didn't say, no, I don't want to do that, let's do this. You wanted to be included, so you were the easygoing one. Maybe you want to be seen as cooperative at work, so maybe you have vastly different opinions about how things should be done, but you keep your mouth shut because you're the go-with-the-flow kind of gal. You're the easygoing one. So how might that be damaging you? Maybe you're inwardly carrying resentments. These people think I, don't have an opinion, or they don't listen to me, or they don't value what I have to say. You're not saying anything, but, because you want to be seen as the easygoing one. So maybe you're carrying around all these inward resentments. Or maybe you have these false assumptions that they're thinking these things about you, or they're saying these things about you. And maybe your negative thoughts about other people are driving some passive-aggressive behaviors. And then you're mad and pissed off when you go home, so you take it out on the people in your private life. Your public persona is this easygoing, go-with-the-flow kind of person, but internally you're raging. And so you go home and you take it out on other people, and you drive through the fast food to get yourself some food to give you some calm. So those are the ways this easygoing exterior may be negatively interfering with your desire to keep your weight off. But if you were able to individuate and say, you know what, my opinion deserves to be heard at work. So whether or not people are going to like me, I'm going to share my opinion. Or, it's becoming willing to be who you are and to say, you know what, I disagree with the direction this plan is going at work. Even if it means there's going to be a little bit of discontent, or even if it means there's going to have to be a little bit of conflict. So anytime we have unexpressed thoughts, feelings, emotions, it's going to hurt us internally. It's going to hurt our mind because we're not going to feel good about ourselves. We know we're not being true to ourselves. It's going to hurt our bodies because we have all this tension and stress. and that causes disease in our bodies, and it's going to hurt our spirits. It's going to hurt our intention to follow through with what we say we want to do, because we're not being authentic with what we think. We're not being authentic with how we feel. And therefore, it's going to be real hard not to engage in emotional eating. It's going to be real hard to say no when somebody offers you food. It's going to be real hard not to go with the flow when people invite you to do things that are going to go against your healthy lifestyle. What if you have a persona as a perfectionist? You know, how might that have been developed? Well, maybe you were super criticized as a kid, and so you're like, I have to do everything perfectly because I'm so terrified of criticism. As a person individuates, they come to understand perfectionism isn't real, and I don't have to be perfect. I can put forth good effort, but it doesn't have to be perfect, and that's not going to mean I'm a failure. What if you have a persona as the funny one, or you're the great guy friend? You know, all the girls love you, but you're never the boyfriend. Or you're always the friend girl, but nobody ever wants to date you. And that's your persona. And you go along with that saying, oh, that's fine and wonderful and dandy and ha 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 ha. Or I'm the fat friend and everybody, oh ha 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 ha. But you're crushed. You're crushed by that. But you don't say it. I don't appreciate being referred to as that. I don't appreciate being seen as that. I don't appreciate being talked to like that. So, because most of this develops subconsciously, just as a survival thing in our youth, it's kind of hard to identify it until we get some help or until somebody starts pointing it out. So as you lose weight, there's this, and I'm going to say this is a false sense of bravado, a false sense of improved self-esteem. Research shows that the increase in self-esteem after weight loss is temporary. Who you are on the inside is who you are, and it's going to come back. So even though you may lose the weight and you may feel on top of the world for a while, it's for a while. Because until you work through whatever big hairy bullshit has been weighing you down before you lost the weight, you're still going to feel that way to a large degree, even with the weight loss, when you may have a temporary boost in what appears to be self-worth. Okay, so it's important to do this individuation thing because it is your path to wholeness. And it's only by being a whole person who loves and values yourself, who is willing to say, this is who I am, like me or don't like me. This is what I believe, agree with me or don't agree with me. This is how I choose to conduct my life, accept it or don't accept it. This is how I choose to eat, like it or don't like it, eat this way with me or don't. This is who I am. These are my thoughts. These are my feelings. These are my observations about life. And I am going to be true to who I am. That is the path to wholeness. According to Carl Jung, the purpose of our whole life is to realize our greatest potential and to become that whole person. And we can't do that until we're willing to genuinely be who we are, say what we think, stand up for what we believe in, say no to our parents and not feel guilty. So how do you shed these personas and become more authentic and individuated? Because the more authentic you are and the more individuated you are, the more successful you're going to be with following through with your commitments to your weight loss journey, with following through with commitments even when the going gets tough, to say no when whatever it is isn't going to serve you well, to set boundaries for yourself, to not have to be involved in everything. So to achieve success in whatever area of life we want, we got to strip away all these false identities and these egos that have protected us for a long time. So it's not about shaming ourselves and go, oh my God, you were such a do-gooder or a pleaser or a go along with the crowd, or It's good for you for surviving. You did what you had to do to survive. But now you're an adult and you're going to do better by being genuine. Because when we go along with, when we have these personas, when we say yes to just so we're liked, when we go along with the crowd just so we're included, that's how we have survived, and we needed to do that. But as a healthy individuated self, you find healthy people to hang with. You find healthy ways to get your own needs met. You find healthy ways to find comfort, not through food. You learn who you are, and you learn that you can take care of yourself and that you're worth doing it. That's what individuation is. And that is absolutely going to be critical to your long-term success in whatever. So we got to strip away these personas. You know what? I've acted like a perfectionist. I don't need to be a perfectionist. I acted like a wallflower. I don't need to be a wallflower. I acted like whatever. But we got to figure this stuff out, and it's painful. And that's why most people don't do it. That's why most people resist this process of individuation, because first of all, I don't want to say I had problems. I don't want to say I was hurt. I don't want to say I hid behind my weight or my addiction or my perfectionism or my straight A's or my, rebelliousness or whatever it was. We have to acknowledge not only our good things, but the things that aren't so good about us. And that's this conflict, and that's where this thing gets can get very deep. But a lot of people avoid doing that inner work. I know we're getting a little long here, so I'll try to wrap this up here. But a lot of people avoid and would rather conform than do the work to figure out who it is that they want to be. But here are some things that you can do to begin this process of individuation. You got to look back. You got to look at the limitations placed on you in your childhood, whether it was, you were told you were no good, or you were picked on, or you were teased, and those things shut a kid down, right? Or you were compared to a sibling, or whatever it was. You've got to look back and say, these are the things that stifled my actual awesomeness, right? You've got to immerse yourself in a bunch of different experiences to find out, what do I like? Maybe you forgot. So, read some books, take a painting class, go to some concerts, scuba dive, learn to swim, go to a cooking class, do whatever you want to do. Go to the theater. Try a variety of new things, because this is going to help you discover or rediscover some inner interests or some inner talents that, maybe your spouse or your parents were like shutting this, like, oh, who would want to go to musical theater? Well, I sure as heck would. So if everybody around me is saying that's stupid and dumb, and I go to a few and maybe I go, you know what? I like these. You don't have to go with me, but I'm going to go. So you're awakening in your process of individuation to what you like, and you're willing to say that. And every day, practicing sharing your thoughts, sharing your feelings, even if it's scary. It's like, well, I was always shut down because I wanted to make my parents happy, so I never spoke my truth. So as you're individuating, maybe you can work with a therapist or a friend to say, I want to tell my parents that I really have never enjoyed going to family vacation in, wherever the heck they go. So I'm not going to go anymore because it's really torture for me. That's going to be a hard thing to do. But maybe if you rehearse it with a friend and a therapist, and you rehearse it for a long time, then eventually you can say that to your parent, knowing you're going to get backlash. Or maybe, you missed out on some experience as a kid because your family financially didn't have the means. And so somehow you think you're not worthy of attending a ballet or, something you consider like, my people don't do that. Do some of those things. Get out there and try them and say, you know what, I am interested in that and I can afford it today. And I don't have to feel guilty because I'm going and, the rest of my family still doesn't have the means to do that. I am going to live my life. I'm going to be generous and share, but I'm not going to let my background stop me from being who I want to be. Another way to get in touch with who you really are is to keep a journal. And maybe ask yourself a question and then answer it honestly. Or get a journal that has, pre-written, thought-provoking questions to help you really here's what I've always said to people, but the truth is, there's actually a part of me that doesn't believe that. So the process of individuating is saying, what do I do that doesn't serve me well? I end up eating. Like if you're an emotional eater, you're like, what led to me doing this? Because in some way I was not being genuine, and I will go to the bank on that one. When you give in to emotional eating, it's because in some way you were being disingenuous. Yes, you've developed a habit, so there is that piece. But if you're eating because you're upset, because somebody said something, you didn't speak back, but you wanted to, learning to do that may be the thing that keeps you from eating emotionally, because you haven't kept those emotions in, you've expressed them, and learning to do so in a healthy way. So we have to learn to be genuine. We have to learn to be authentic. We have to learn to take risks. And that's why, in addition to acknowledging the big hairy bullshit that stifled you, your genuine self as a child, in addition to trying on a lot of new things and new experiences, in addition to maybe journaling, get a therapist. Because a therapist can help you learn. I do this, but I want to do that. I give in to peer pressure, but what I want to do is this. I give in to eating, but what I want to do is that. I quit exercising when what I want to do is really be healthy. So a therapist can help you learn by asking the right questions, by helping you come to yourself, to find your true self. So find a therapist, because so much of this is in our subconscious. We're not going to go there on our own, and a lot of times a therapist can help us dig into places that are hard for us to dig into and practice scenarios that are difficult. So you have to be able to you have to be willing to recognize your faults. You have to be able to recognize your strengths. You have to be willing to practice new skills. You have to be willing to do things even when it's scary. So when you discover your true self, nobody else can tell you who you are. They can say something, but it's not going to destroy you. They can make fun of you, and you're going to be like, that is so about them. You are confident in who you are, and you will take care of yourself because you will stick up for yourself. So, putting your true self into practice and protecting your weight loss by following through with that healthy life. So in other words, what's it look like to be more individuated in order to maintain the motivation to follow through with the gotta do's, the motivation to keep going when the going gets tough, to remain committed in action, not just word, to your healthy lifestyle. The litmus test, again, is always, can you say no to your parents and not feel guilty? Can you set boundaries? No, I will not go to a buffet. No, I am not going to sample your desserts. No, I am not going to be on that committee. Yes, I do attend that concert. You can go with me or you don't have to. Individuated people state their thoughts and their feelings. I feel angry that you just referred to me as thoughtless. It hurts when you contact all of my siblings but leave me out of the communication. I'd really appreciate it if you told me your preference about the movie you'd like to see. Wow, I'd really be grateful if you'd follow through with putting the dishes away like you said you would this morning. Individuated people hold themselves accountable, and they hold other people accountable. I said I'd go walking with my friend. I don't really feel like it, but I follow through with my commitments. You know what, honey? It'd mean a lot to me if you'd really pack your lunch. You're saying this to your kid. If you'd pack your lunch before bed like we agreed. If you continue to forget, there's no longer going to be a mommy packed lunch thrown together at the last minute for you to have at school. So setting boundaries. An individuated person feels the fear of doing something, but they do it anyway. You're afraid to share your idea at work, but you do it anyway. You're worried about saying no to chairing the committee, but you say no anyway. You're afraid that your mom's going to be angry with you if you don't agree to go with her to wherever, and you don't want to go, and you don't want to make her mad, but you tell her you're not going. All of our repressed thoughts and feelings are going to harm you physically, emotionally, and with your commitment to a healthy lifestyle. So if you want to be better able to live your authentic life and to follow through with your commitments, to follow through with who you want to be in terms of maintaining a healthy weight and anything else in your life, work on individuation. Take-home messages as I wrap up. Individuation is a process. It's a very worthwhile process, only if you want to live as an authentic self and live a life you feel good about and be a you feel good about. And learning to individuate often requires the help of professionals because we fool ourselves and we buy into our own BS. And finally, the happiest people are those who've dug themselves out from under the heap of the big, hairy bullshit of living a fake life. And please, watch House Sitter. It's so funny. All right, here's something you can do today. Get out there and sign up for the next class of Gain While You Lose. It's a great 10-week online class that I teach twice a year. And you can also do this today. Get yourself into some therapy. And one last thing that you can start today. Challenge yourself every day with taking one small risk to be more your authentic self. Post what you did in BariAftercare and let us know. And let us know how we can help you too. And remember, we're talking about your health. We're talking about your life, which is your responsibility. Yep, this day and every day. Thanks for sticking it out with me. I know this was a long episode, but individuation is critical for your ongoing health and lifestyle and your happiest, most authentic self. All right, my friends, talk to you next time. Bye-bye.